Dedicated to Eastern and Southern Kentucky, this is WYNT Mountain News at 11.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. A key coronavirus model has now made a major tweak in its projections on how many deaths we may see in America as we pass another grim milestone with 101,000 deaths in the U.S. Camilla Bernard has the latest.
So sad. We'll always carry them in our hearts, that big number of people.
A moment of silence in the nation's capital as the United States passes a major morbid milestone in the coronavirus pandemic.
The president has said one death is too many.
This as New York's governor plans to enact an executive order allowing businesses to turn away anyone not wearing a face mask as the state begins to reopen.
You don't want to wear a mask? Fine. But you don't have a right to then go into that store if that store owner doesn't want you to.
In nearby Massachusetts, the world-famous Boston Marathon now canceled.
This kind of event would not be responsible or realistic on September 14th or any time this year.
Meanwhile, a key COVID model is projecting 132,000 people will die in the United States by August. This about 11,000 less from its last projection.
But there's new data now coming in on how people are behaving, in terms of avoiding contact on their own, as well as wearing masks.
And after weeks of teasing that the U.S. will punish China for the pandemic, the president says an announcement is coming on Friday.
China should have stopped it at the source, but they didn't do that. So we'll be making certain decisions and we'll be discussing them.
I'm Camilla Bernal reporting.
Today, Governor Andy Beshear reported 113 new cases and 9 new deaths from COVID-19 in Kentucky. More than 9,100 Kentuckians have contracted the virus. The death toll is now at 409. Almost 3,200 people have recovered. The governor also announced that he is hopeful the state will be able to open a limited number of public pools the week of June 29th with extensive precautions. As more than 40,000 people still wait to hear back on their unemployment claims, Kentucky's unemployment system suffered a potential data security breach last month. Deputy Secretary Josh Benton says a user was able to view verification documents uploaded for other claims. That happened back on April 23rd. Benton says a software patch was made later that day. He says as of now, there are no reports of identity theft. Governor Beshear has asked the Inspector General to review what happened.
To ensure that our software is where it needs to be and to review the practices and procedures. I want to make sure that we respond quickly, and we respond correctly each and every time.
The governor also announced he's reorganizing the cabinet and moving the unemployment insurance group under the labor cabinet to help with processing. The governor also announced today that a privately owned prison in Floyd County will reopen to shift inmates from overcrowded county jails. The 656-bed facility in Wheelwright will be called the Southeast State Correctional Complex. Officials said it last held inmates in 2012. It's expected to provide more than 200 jobs, and you might remember last October, former Governor Matt Bevin also announced the prison would reopen, but when he left office, the future of the project remained unclear. This week, Kentucky schools got more guidance on what it might take to welcome students back in person this fall. Superintendents were told to create 3 calendars with different starting dates 2 weeks ago. After that, Public Health Commissioner Dr. Stephen Stack told superintendents that reality may look like every healthy student and staff member wearing a mask and enhanced social distancing in classrooms and on buses. While a tall task, some Eastern Kentucky superintendents say they are going to do what's safe.
There's going to be some challenges, and there were challenges when we went to NTI because we were not an NTI district and had never done that, but we got a great group of administrators and teachers and staff that pulled that together really fast. I mean, within a matter of just 48 or 72 hours. And
Jet says they are looking at several options and want feedback from parents and guardians. During a tour of Kentucky, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell stressed the importance of wearing masks as the Commonwealth reopens. The senator said there should be no stigma for wearing a mask and that Kentuckians should act responsibly to avoid a spike in cases. Senator McConnell is, of course, in the midst of a re-election campaign. Lake Cumberland and Buckhorn Lake State Resort Parks will reopen now on June 8th. The governor made that clarification tonight after saying earlier they would open June 1st, along with other Kentucky state parks. So it's now June 8th. We just reported yesterday about plans for Buckhorn and 3 other state parks to remain closed to free up housing for people who need to self-isolate due to COVID-19. Some state legislators had said the move would effectively bankrupt some parts of the state, and the governor changed course today.
Well, a few of us are still seeing those rain showers tonight, but most of us are now on the drier side and going to be seeing those dry conditions from here on out. But you can see, looking at our satellite and radar, we have seen these scattered showers throughout pretty much all evening tonight, and it's left just a little bit of some eerie look on some places. This is in London, Kentucky, and this is a picture of just a huge shelf cloud over there. This is from Danielle Smoot. You might remember the name. She's a former WYMT employee. Thank you, Danielle, for sending this in. But other than that, we're actually seeing some pretty nice conditions for most of us. Temperatures already cooling down a little bit, where most of us are in those 60s, with really the exception of Jackson. They're still at 71, and Harlan there at 72. Just a few places still in those 70s, but most of us starting to cool down into those 60s, and we are going to continue to cool down as we head into the rest of those overnight hours, even getting into those lower to mid 60s by the time we get into tomorrow morning. Steve?
All right, Brooke, thank you. We want to bring you an update now out of Minneapolis. This is a live picture of the situation in the Twin Cities right now, where protests of the killing of an unarmed black man have escalated into riots. You can see a large crowd gathered there. We've seen fires burning earlier as well. Now the mayor has declared an emergency, and elected officials and community leaders are urging calm. CBS's Jeff Pegues is in Minneapolis.
The Twin Cities continued to smolder with anger when dawn broke Thursday morning, as unrest over the death of George Floyd turned to rage overnight. The 46-year-old died after being detained by police on suspicion of passing a phony $20 bill. The tragedy prompted immediate outrage, sparking protests that have turned violent at times. Fires burned through the night. You can see the smoke still billowing in the air. A Target store was one of several that were vandalized or looted. Other buildings were burned, including an auto parts store near the police station where the officers worked. Longtime community activist Spike Moss says this is what happens to dreams deferred. Does this violence help?
It doesn't help anything, but it lets you know they're tired. They're tired of being oppressed, being misused, being abused, being murdered at will.
Governor Tim Walz has activated the Minnesota National Guard to help restore order. 4 police officers involved in the arrest have been fired, including Derek Chauvin, the one seen on video kneeling on Floyd's neck until he lost consciousness. Those officers are now the subject of several investigations, including by the FBI and the Justice Department. Local prosecutor Michael Freeman will decide if criminal charges should be filed.
We are going to investigate it as expeditiously, as thoroughly, and completely as justice demands. Sometimes that takes a little time, and we ask people to be patient. We have to do this right, and that's what we'll do.
Today, the city's police chief apologized for his officers' actions on Monday, but it's hard to tell whether that's going to make a difference out here right now. In fact, behind me at the police precinct where the 4 fired officers once worked, protesters are still surrounding the building. The building is still under siege. Jeff Pegues, CBS News, Minneapolis.
Back here in Eastern Kentucky, last night, the mayor of Pineville announced an executive order and put a curfew in place for the city of Pineville. WYMT's Emily Bennett talked to him today as he said a string of thefts and other crimes forced him to make that decision.
For several weeks, calls have flooded the Pineville Police Department. 8 or 9 calls in one day in a small town like ours, that's a lot.
Reporting thefts and other crimes.
I am charged with protecting the people of Pineville and their property, and that's what I'm going to do.
Which prompted Mayor Scott Maiden to put a curfew in place from 11 p.m. until 6 a.m. He thinks because police were not patrolling as much because of COVID-19, crime went up.
I think that word got out that we weren't doing that. So they were more apt to be out running and doing things that they shouldn't be doing.
But now patrol will be stepped up.
We're not going to let them destroy people's property anymore. We're not going to let them steal off of people. If they're out doing that, we're going to put them in jail.
Mike Long has lived in Pineville for years.
It's concerning.
And continues to hear of people living on his street having their belongings stolen off of their porches.
Of course, I've got some cameras and some other stuff around my home that would actually capture those. And a lot of them are there now, especially with what's been going on, their home.
For him, he is thankful action is being taken.
They've made this change because of reactions to people calling them and telling them about there's a problem, or they wouldn't have caused this.
Hopeful crime will take a downward turn. In Pineville, Emily Bennett, WYMT Mountain News.
Lexington has 673 cases of COVID-19. Half of those are inmates at the Federal Medical Center. According to the Lexington-Fayette County Health Department, 268 inmates have tested positive. That includes 20 more from yesterday. And of Lexington's 13 COVID-19 deaths, 4 were inmates at the federal prison. Health officials say the increasing numbers do not come as a surprise.
When you're living in these close quarters, particularly places like a jail or this Federal Medical Center, you see an increased likelihood of a spread.
The facility is providing take-home test kits for its 500 employees. We've gotten a look at 4 scenarios the University of Kentucky is considering for its fall semester. They include a normal start, a delayed start, a hybrid semester, and a fully online semester. Administrators say their main goal is getting back on campus this fall, although they are preparing a backup plan as well. But some challenges remain.
Is there going to be a second wave or a third wave or multiple waves? Are we going to see how are we going to react and respond to as we start to reopen and open the spigot, if you will? And so how do we pivot?
UK estimates it will lose an estimated $200 million of their more than $4 billion budget. A video shared thousands of times serving as a lesson to many people about the unseen impact of this pandemic. 2 families in Floyd County have listened to their kids beg to hug each other for the past few months. WYMT's Buddy Forbes spoke to those families about the emotional moment when that hug took place.
An act so often taken for granted.
I cried too. When he started to cry, then I started to cry. Yeah.
With the ability to help shoulder some of the world's weight.
We were kind of started laughing when they started crying because, wow, but then it kind of set in. Our laughs turned into cries. We were all bawling and crying when we realized what was happening kind of in that moment.
A weight that cousins Hucky Collins and Rosie Arnett have been carrying for months.
He's not been Hucky during quarantine because we can't get close. And last night when we hugged, he was being funny again. He was being Hucky again.
Now the pair is glad to get back in the swing of things. Because while the isolation had Hucky feeling deflated,
it's not fun, really.
He was not alone.
I'm getting through this way better now. Me too. I was starting to get
and their parents were shocked.
Really down. I was getting depressed.
Because they did not realize how their kids truly felt.
They can't pinpoint and say exactly how they're feeling and what they're struggling with, but I think seeing that just like it just came out of them.
And how much that connection, in whatever form,
high-fiving people and fist bumps and all that,
helps even the youngest person.
I just think that people need other people.
Feel less alone. In Floyd County, Buddy Forbes, WYMT Mountain News.
Great story. Arnett says the lesson he learned from the moment was raw and real, so the families are now sticking together and widening their net just a little to keep their mental health in check. Coming up on Mountain News at 11, watch as family members tearfully reunite with nursing home patients from a distance through a parade.
And more scattered showers and storms are expected for tomorrow. I'll provide your full forecast coming up.